I'd now like to introduce Serenity Hill. Serenity is from a beef and wool farming family in Warrenbane, which we all know where Warrenbane is, and was brought up with a strong sense of social and economic justice. I can vouch for that because in 1996 I actually handed out how to vote cards for Serenity's father when he was running for state election back in those times, and obviously values match. So she believes in the need for systems that care for the land and people that depend on it. It's interesting. It's the systems, but it's also the people that depend on the land. Serenity first worked in government and then academia, seeking ways to make a difference. She has extensive experience in policy development in the Victorian State Government, particularly natural resource management and climate change adaptation. Her PhD research studies explored what motivates farmers and the significant increasing challenges most face in the context of climate, input costs and the market dynamics stacked against them. This early experience solidified a belief in regenerative agriculture, which builds soil, is resilient to shocks, and supports happy farmers staying on the land. The connections to health and well-being in all the presentations is very strong. Serenity believes regenerative agriculture can only become the norm if supported by fair markets and supply networks in which the basic economics support farmers to manage the land within its capacity. The Open Food Network was always about the long game, supporting a movement for people seeking alternative distribution models that can scale beyond a niche. Hawkesbury Harvest had some examples of people doing that. Serenity and Kirsten Larson were the co-founders of the Open Food Network, and if she wasn't now working on Open Food Network, Serenity would be working in other systemic improvements to the food system around governance, ownership and investment. Please welcome Serenity to tell us about the Open Food Network.
Oh, great. Thank you. So yes, I'm from not too far away. And really my kind of personal long game is working for real alternatives for family farms to sell into markets other than commodity markets, which don't work very well for the kind of long term. But so we've been working on the Open Food Network for, it was an idea about 5 years ago, so it's a long-term project. But what is it actually? So it's e-commerce. So at its very basic level, for farmers wanting to sell kind of directly, they can have a free online store or a free listing, directory listing. But where it really comes into its own is where it enables enterprises, farming enterprises and other enterprises, intermediaries, to work together to access kind of larger markets and alternative markets. Now we are both open source, which means that the kind of the software underlying it is available for anyone to use all over the world, and that's been an amazing experience for us because that's enabled us to connect with a whole lot of other organisations that are now using Open Food Network in other countries, and that means that there is kind of collaborative investment and it's continually improving, and we can kind of help people kind of learn from each other. And we're not for profit. So we've funded this platform from government grants, predominantly from the health sector, and some philanthropy, and that's added up to almost $500,000 over 5 years. So it's not an insubstantial kind of like investment in this platform. There's a lot kind of under the bonnet that, you know, we have people come to us, say, oh, I'll just build it myself. And then they sort of come back about a year later and, oh, actually, it's a little bit more complex than we thought. Really? So anyway, I'll get on to it. So today I kind of want to talk a bit about positioning kind of in the food system and the kind of strategies that work and kind of where Open Food Network kind of is. The main thing I want to focus on is some kind of enterprise and kind of collaboration models that Open Food Network helps, but you can kind of do without Open Food Network as well. But I just want to stimulate some thinking about what are some other kind of alternatives for farmers in particular to work together. And then at Open Food Network, we've done a whole lot of, with a recent grant, a whole lot of work on capacity building resources for enterprises. So I'll just touch on that. And Jade Miles has worked with us. Jade from Beechworth Food Co-op has worked with us on that stuff as well. So you can also follow up with her afterwards, and other ways that we can help. So our focus is on supporting diverse, locally responsible food enterprises to create new food economies. And so we're not really focused on kind of policy, but we do kind of advise local government about how they can better support local food enterprises. And we also feed into other advocacy bodies. So I'm also on the committee of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. So we feed in advice about how to advocate for change to support local food enterprises. So this is just a kind of positioning thing about when we're talking about the food system. The zero in the middle is like personal production of food, so that's like household production. Lots of initiatives around that stuff are so important to start with and to build on as the base, because it's about food literacy, people understanding where their food comes from, and building that base of personal production of food. The next kind of level is kind of farmers markets and farmers selling food directly, and so there's heaps of kind of effort around that as well, and that's the next level that we need to kind of work on and support. And where Open Food Network is really wanting to kind of make a difference is in the next tier up, which is kind of food hubs and kind of collaborative enterprises like Beechworth Food Co-op that are kind of like helping farmers work together with consumers to kind of reach different markets. And then above there's kind of like, you know, then there's the supermarkets and the global anonymous kind of system, and we just sort of ignore that because we're building something else. Look, you can't read this, but I kind of like it because it's like, so on this axis it's sort of like higher value and then higher volume. So here is your kind of successful commodity producers, so big farmers, and you know, good luck to them, great, if you can be at the sort of scale where you can be successful in that system. So we don't play there at all. Over here is where you've got sort of smaller family farmers who are trying to play in that system, but are, you know, in the danger zone. So they need an alternative. What alternative markets can I sell to? And the option is to go into kind of direct marketing, which is, you know, farmers markets and selling their own stuff online. But that's a huge transition because it's completely different production systems, a completely different kind of skill set. And Open Food Network is trying to kind of like create options and support options up here, which is much more of this kind of working together to kind of get larger volume, larger value kind of markets. And I'll talk more about that, but just so you're positioning, understand our kind of positioning. So this is what the front page of Open Food Network is, a Australia-wide website. And when you first go in there, so the focus is on source of identification. That's the key thing that we sort of do differently, among other things. So if you are shopping through an intermediary, so a food hub or some other kind of food enterprise that isn't the original farmer themselves, you can see back to the farmer. So there's transparency in terms of how much that farmer got paid, and you can kind of like when you're shopping and buying this tomato, you know, you can see where it came from. So we've got multi-farm kind of shops. So to start off with, you can kind of go into a page like this and you can find the shop that you want to shop in. So there's a whole lot of, you can kind of search by different things and find shops near you, and then you can go into that shop and shop with that farmer. I can tell that. There's also, so that's basically on our website, but we're soon to release a feature where you can basically embed your Open Food Network shop in your own branded website. So we've had particularly farmers, you know, direct marketing who want to have their own brand and they don't want their customers going off to another website, you know. So this is going to be a really important kind of piece in the puzzle next in terms of what people need. You know, okay, so here's where I'm, like, I think I want a shop with 95 biodynamics. I can see basically, I can pick up, orders are open now, they've got these sort of products, and then you go in their shop and you don't see commerce, you're buying online. Now the only cost for having a shop on the Open Food Network is, you know, setting up your kind of depending on what payment methods. If you're using kind of credit card, there's a payment with, you know, a different provider, but this is all free. You can manage multiple enterprises. So if you're a kind of food hub, you can get permission to manage the inventory for multiple farmers who you work with. So you might have farmers who are kind of like, oh, I don't want to kind of deal with technology, and you can provide that service to them, and then you can add on an admin cost that says, for doing that for you, I'm going to add on 5% anyway. So it does all of these kind of things that I won't try not to go into too much detail. It also can be just a basic directory. So over Australia, there can just be like listings, like profile listings, where someone might have a different website or, you know, it's Farmgate or something. So there's that basic kind of directory and search stuff. And we're kind of looking for project partners to develop the directory and search functionality because it could be so much better. And particularly if people want to kind of embed, you know, their own kind of regional map in a kind of own branded website, like we're really open to working with people on that sort of thing. This is an example of a kind of profile once you kind of click on one of those icons. Okay, so what Open Food Network doesn't do, and we found by talking to people, it's kind of like, well, I thought I'd just set up a thing and then all the customers would come to me. And it's like, oh no, actually, it's just a kind of website. So it helps you more efficiently sell to those customers, but you still need to do the hard work in terms of who are my customers, what do they need, you know, get them. And then, you know, once you've got them, it's a quick and beautiful experience to do their shopping. And it doesn't do the logistics for you. So we've had, I'll talk about a bit later about the potential I see for existing farmers markets to use kind of an online complement to their kind of existing services. But that needs to come with thinking through what that additional kind of logistics service kind of is as well. And having said that, though, it does enable some quite complex stuff in terms of multiple pickup points, so that the customer experience in terms of understanding your logistics is made easier. And we also, yeah, we have a lot of people going, oh, well, it does all these things, but it doesn't do this thing. And it's like, oh, we've also invested in this massive kind of community development, so chances are someone in the world will also want that thing. So there's an opportunity to kind of co-invest in developing that thing, you know. So it's worthwhile to talk with us, and we can help like put together a project to, you know, develop the feature that you want. So, and that also means is as we're getting more and more partners and more investment, it's getting better faster, and that's available to everybody. So the main thing I want to talk about today, and if I only get through this section, that's it. So some models to think about in terms of different sorts of enterprises that can help get local and source identified food to people. And what I want to emphasise here is I think there's quite a lot of disempowering stuff going on in regions where it's like, we've got this big project and we have to get heaps of funding and we can't do anything until we've done the thing. But I think my biggest message is you kind of start where you are, and you start with small projects that kind of test ideas, build community, build kind of momentum, and then you can kind of grow into more complex governance, more complex kind of infrastructure. Okay, so this is about collaboration. So this is like an option for individual producers, community-supported agriculture, collaborating and risk sharing with consumers. So this is, now I'm going to go through these really quickly, but I'll provide the slides, and it sort of just gives you the framework to then be able to kind of Google, come onto our resources and read more about them. The key part of this is a upfront subscription. So the kind of your consumers sort of buy a season ahead, and if something goes wrong with the crop, then they share in that kind of risk. We're just about to launch new functionality around subscriptions, which means we have the complete functionality for community-supported agriculture, which is kind of neat. Now, this is Jade, obviously, who many of you know, and Beechworth Co-op is not a buying group, but this is my point about often many of these models are driven by consumers to start off with. So they can be very, very simple with a group of 12 families getting together to be a buying, to have group buying, to either buy directly from farmers or from source identified product from wholesalers. Now, I'm living part-time in Violetown, and Kirsten and I are going to set up a small kind of like consumer buying group to allow us to access organic food. And what we're going to do is have kind of a range of products, but then as we replace as many of those products over time from local producers that we can, and have just pick up from our house, So there's ways of using online and communication resources to reduce your infrastructure costs. But then kind of Beechworth Coal was an example of where they've kind of leapfrogged and got quite a way down the track in terms of sophistication of models and kind of governance, and expanding that to kind of multi-stakeholder. So it's really partnership with producers and consumers. But it starts with that consumer end. Informal collaboration. So this is an example of a farm in Queensland where it's kind of like collaboration driven by one farm. So this farm goes down the hill, sells in a farmer's market, gets produce from lots of other farmers at that farmer's market, drives back up, packs a box and distributes. So that's providing a service for kind of, neighbours in terms of helping them access another market. Another informal example was just someone who drove into a farmer's market every month, and she'd take produce from her neighbours, and so she'd have them available for pre-order on her kind of store. So really simple. It doesn't have to be kind of complex to start this kind of collaboration. This is another one that I think has heaps of potential as a starting initiative. So this is the Palm Coast Food Collective. It's on Open Food Network. It's only just started about 4 months ago, I think. There's about a dozen producers. It's a monthly kind of order cycle or offering, and those producers put up the products that they've got, or with assistance from the admin officer. So behind it, there's someone that's kind of driving it every month, sending out the kind of comms. Here's what's available from all our producers, and then people can shop in the one shop front. And then there's a pickup point Sunday afternoon once a month where all the consumers who've ordered and all the farmers come to one point and pick up the stuff. So that's an example where you just need an undercover space. It doesn't need to be an inside space, and you're using the technology to manage the risk. So if the farm doesn't sell anything, they don't need to come, or they can cancel the orders if they've only sold, it's not worth their trip. And this enables that relationship building between the consumers and the producers. It enables that building up of that trust that could then enable, the next stage thing that group of farmers does. Now this is an experiment that we did with Melbourne farmers markets, where they had an online store for all of their producers just before Christmas. This is an example where it didn't really work because I think for online stuff to work for farmers markets, as I said earlier, you need to have the farmers market going strategically. We're going to set up a completely different offering, an enterprise actually, that kind of works alongside the farmers market, that is coordinating the logistics for those farmers and helping them access other markets that they wouldn't already. Because people who are already going to farmers markets, like going to the farmers market, they don't need to order online, So it's like the people who aren't coming to the farmers markets that a farmers market organisation might take the leadership to try and access with an online offering. Pop-up market. This is just another example. This has been set up and driven mostly by increasing access in disadvantaged communities. It's operating in kind of Melbourne in about half a dozen sites at the moment, where it's basically, they are buying conventional from the wholesale market. So but their strategic direction is to be able to buy from farmers, but keep the cost down by the way that they're doing the markets, which is basically, it costs them, it's 10 hours, $25 an hour for a market manager, 1 day a week to kind of set up the stall, sell the food, and they've got, so it's a really nice, potentially replicable model, and one we're very keen to work with Community Grocer about how they get to more distributed supply. And this is another one of my favourite examples of, in Edithvale, there's a greengrocer, and he's thought really carefully about logistics. So he does the same thing where he's like, he only delivers within 4 kilometres, and he drives out, so 2 days a week he'll drive out, pick up from farmers, do like a 3-hour run, pack the boxes that day and deliver them that day. So he keeps his costs down, and he can make that, you know, be a really good job and livelihood for him by providing that service. Retail Food Hub, this is a really good example, if you haven't heard of it, of something that works in a regional kind of town context. This is in Wearable. They kind of have got to that, you know, they've been going for a long time. They started by 3 farmers collaborating, having a joint stall at the farmers markets in Melbourne. And then it's built up over time, sustainable kind of, you know, development. Yeah, okay. And they're kind of currently, I think they're probably up to about 200 or 250 boxes, and they've really also thought really carefully about logistics. So the farmers drop off at the food hub and customers come once a week to kind of pick up their boxes. And that's a whole other... So Food Connect in Brisbane is really interesting because they're selling through those consumer buying groups. So they're kind of like, they buy from 80 different farmers and they coordinate into kind of wholesale orders for those community buying groups that kind of volunteer pack the orders. And then once you've kind of, I think there's a huge potential as we're losing regional processing for kind of meat producers is a massive issue. So it's kind of like, there's an example in Dalesford that I would encourage people to kind of follow of a cooperative development of a kind of regional abattoir and secondary processing as well. But you've sort of got to develop all of your community and trust and everything before you're ready to be putting in kind of big money applications to do that sort of stuff. But that's where we need to get to. We need to get to democratic ownership of regional kind of processing. I'll just leave it at this slide. So I would say, you know, building the community, go where the energy is. So, you know, you kind of know where the people have got to get up and go, you know. So everyone get behind them and just help them. Focus on logistics early because it's what's going to undo you. Think about, so it's not so much about being big scale or little scale, it's about matching the scale along the supply chain. So if you're doing kind of a food hub, you're wanting to build your kind of small and medium producers. Anyway, you have to match. And lean startup, this last one, start with what are your assumptions, prototyping, testing, with little cheap ways of testing what you're doing, instead of making big mistakes. Now, I've got a whole lot of slides. If you go to openfoodnetwork.org.au, we also have a whole section called Open Food Network Learn. And here is a whole lot of resources about different models, a whole lot of resources for different kind of food enterprises and kind of farming. So I would encourage you to go there. Also, we've supported, this is my last point. We've supported a thing called the Australian Fair Food Forum, which is fairfoodforum.org.au, which is basically a place where you can go and ask questions. And be supported by other people kind of working in fair food. So I would also encourage you to go there and ask and answer people's questions. So that's enough from me.